Imagine boarding a plane on a normal evening. You take your seat, you order a drink, everything feels routine. Now imagine this. A few hours later, a man on that same plane jumps out of the aircraft with $200,000 in cash. No body is ever found. No confirmed identity is ever discovered. And more than 50 years later, the FBI still doesn't know who he was. This is not a movie. This is not a fictional story. This is a real crime, and it remains one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American history. On November 24, 1971, a man walked into Portland International Airport in Oregon. He carried a small black briefcase. He wore a black suit, a white shirt, and a thin black tie. He approached the counter and bought a one-way ticket to Seattle. The name he gave was Dan Cooper. Nothing about him seemed suspicious. He was calm, polite, quiet. At that moment, nobody knew they were looking at a man who would soon become legendary. Flight 305 was a short domestic flight, Portland to Seattle. Only 36 passengers were on board. Dan Cooper took his seat near the back of the plane. After takeoff, he ordered a bourbon and soda. He lit a cigarette and relaxed. Flight attendants later said he was respectful and well-spoken. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't act nervous. Everything about him felt normal. But that normal feeling would not last long. Shortly after the plane reached cruising altitude, Cooper handed a note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. She glanced at the note briefly. Like many flight attendants, she assumed it was a phone number. She placed it in her pocket and walked away. That's when Cooper leaned closer and spoke in a calm, steady voice. "Miss, you'd better read that note. I have a bomb." Florence stopped walking. She opened the note again. This time she read it carefully, and in that moment everything changed. Inside the briefcase Cooper was carrying, he claimed there was a bomb, and unless his demands were met, he was willing to use it. What began as a routine flight was now a hijacking, and the man known as Dan Cooper was about to write his name into criminal history. The note Cooper handed to the flight attendant was short, direct, and terrifying. He demanded $200,000 in cash. He demanded 4 parachutes. And he wanted the money delivered before the plane landed in Seattle. To prove he was serious, Cooper calmly opened his briefcase just enough for the flight attendant to see inside. There were wires. There were red cylindrical objects. And there was no doubt that this was meant to look like a bomb. Florence immediately informed the cockpit. The pilot contacted air traffic control. Air traffic control contacted local authorities. Within minutes, the FBI was notified. Despite the chaos unfolding behind the scenes, Cooper remained completely calm. He did not shout. He did not threaten anyone directly. He even reassured the crew. He told them he did not want to hurt anyone. He told them to follow instructions and everything would be fine. As the plane continued flying towards Seattle, the authorities scrambled. Banks across the city were contacted. $10,000 $20 bills were collected. Every single bill had its serial number recorded by the FBI. This was done so the money could be tracked later. While all of this was happening, Cooper sat quietly in his seat. He drank his bourbon. He smoked his cigarettes. There was no panic in his voice, no visible fear. To the crew, it felt like he had planned every detail. When the plane finally landed in Seattle, police vehicles surrounded the runway. FBI agents waited nearby with the ransom money. The exchange was completed exactly as Cooper demanded. The money was brought on board, the parachutes were delivered, and then something unexpected happened. Cooper released all the passengers. Every single passenger walked off the plane unharmed. At this moment, Cooper could have escaped. The money was his. Police were nearby, but Cooper had no intention of leaving the plane. Instead, he gave the pilots new instructions. He ordered them to take off again. This time, the destination was Mexico City. But there were strict conditions. The plane must fly at low altitude, at slow speed, and most importantly, the rear staircase of the Boeing 727 must remain unlocked during flight. This demand confused the crew. At the time, very few people even knew that a plane could be exited mid-air using the rear staircase. But Cooper knew, and that knowledge would soon become the key to his disappearance. And the plane took off once again, heading south into the night. Outside, the weather was getting worse. Heavy rain fell across the region. Strong winds battered the aircraft. Inside the cabin, the crew followed Cooper's instructions exactly. At some point during the flight, Cooper put on one of the parachutes. He tied the bag of ransom money securely around his waist. Then he walked toward the rear of the plane. Without hesitation, Cooper opened the rear staircase. Cold air rushed inside. The sound of the wind became deafening. The plane shook violently as it continued flying through the storm. The crew remained in the cockpit, unable to see what was happening behind them. At approximately 8:13 p.m., they felt a sudden upward movement. The pressure inside the aircraft changed. D.B. Cooper had jumped. He jumped into complete darkness, into freezing rain. into a forested region filled with mountains and rivers. When the plane eventually landed, Cooper was gone. No one had seen him leave. No one knew exactly where he landed. Only a few items remained behind, a black clip-on tie, and several cigarette butts. The FBI immediately launched a massive search operation. Helicopters flew over forests. Police searched rivers and mountains. Search teams combed the terrain for days. But nothing was found. No parachute, no body, no clear landing zone. It was as if Cooper had vanished. Years passed with no answers. Then, in 1980, nearly 9 years later, a young boy discovered something shocking. While playing near the Columbia River, he found several bundles of cash buried in the sand. The total amount was $5,800. When authorities examined the money, the serial numbers matched the ransom from the Cooper hijacking. This discovery proved one thing: the case was real, and the mystery was far from over. With no body and no confirmed identity, investigators were left with theories. The first theory was simple. D.B. Cooper did not survive the jump. The weather was extreme. The terrain was dangerous, and Cooper jumped wearing a suit, not survival gear. Many experts believe he died shortly after landing, but others disagreed. The second theory suggests Cooper survived and escaped. Supporters of this theory argue that Cooper chose the exact aircraft for a reason. The Boeing 727 allowed mid-air exit. He knew the flight path. He knew the conditions. According to this theory, Cooper landed safely, hid the money, and lived the rest of his life under a new identity. Then there is the third theory, that Cooper had military or intelligence training. His calm behavior, his knowledge of aircraft systems, his confidence under pressure, all of it suggested experience. Over the years, dozens of suspects were investigated. Former soldiers, criminals, airline employees. None were ever proven to be D.B. Cooper. In 2016, after 45 years, the FBI officially closed the case, not because it was solved, but because there were no new leads. Today, D.B. Cooper remains the only unsolved skyjacker in United States history, a man who boarded a plane as a stranger and disappeared as a legend. So now the question is yours. Did D.B. Cooper die that night, or did he escape forever? Share your theory in the comments.